morning, everyone, or good afternoon now. I have to confess that I'm very nervous. This is the first time I'm being host of a webinar, but I really want to start out by thanking everyone for taking time to join us today for this webinar, Moving Toward Healing in Our Criminal Justice System, Prevention while in Detention and Beyond. We're going to highlight, we have 4 speakers who will highlight how Westchester is addressing in some areas, particularly around the criminal justice system, restorative justice, and healing. Tajae Gaynor will talk about their work with the family court system and other work that they're doing to move us towards a more restorative county. And we'll spotlight work that's been done in our county jail and in Woodfield Cottage, and then discuss the restorative justice programs that support people when they return to their communities after incarceration. And I think the real emphasis here is to transform broken systems while being focused on healing. And restorative justice really does offer a new paradigm, although it's a very old paradigm from our indigenous, the indigenous people who walked this land before us. It's also a way to address the inequities in our criminal justice system and beyond. So we have, as I said, 4 speakers today. Claire Hurst and Zaid Ali work with the Family Services of Westchester. Claire works in the Restorative Justice Department with a dynamic team that support youth currently in secure confinement and preparing them for release. They work with mothers and adolescent dads incarcerated in the county jail, men and women returning home from state incarceration, and parents pursuing more meaningful involvement in the lives of their children. The team's goal is to disrupt the school to prison pipeline by meeting people at their point of entanglement with the prison industrial complex and supporting them as they navigate their way through and out of it. Zaid Ali is the program manager for the Community Credible Messenger Initiative as part of the restorative justice team at Family Services Westchester. He has worked tirelessly in the field for many years, and as a man of color and the father of young children, he understands the importance of offering our youth perspectives and support. He and his team are a source of protective and resiliency factors for young people who are impacted by traumatic experiences that have already begun to impact the trajectory of their lives. Then we'll hear from Nathalie Reynoso, who's the Executive Director of Ceremony Cerebellum. Nathalie is living the experience of a brown first-gen American. This catalyzed her to create and interact in spaces that are BIPOC, AAPI, and LGBTQIA2S+. She is a credible messenger, a circle keeper, a performing artist, yoga instructor, and trauma coach. She is in community teaching wellness and social equity accountability through her organization, Ceremony Cerebellum, which intersects the arts, sciences, activism through the lens of Eurocentric decolonization. She's a peer mediator with the Brave Hearts Bravery Beyond Bars program, as well as the COO of Breaking Bread, Not Hearts. Nathalie has used restorative circles with young people detained in Woodfield Cottage and with people in our county jail. And finally, we'll hear from Tajae Gaynor, the Director of Westchester Rockland Mediation Center of Cluster. He's been there in that role since 2016. Tajae developed a passion for conflict resolution over 25 years ago as a junior high school peer mediator. And since then, he has worked with thousands of young people, adults, teaching conflict resolution skills, restorative justice, mediation, and implementing programs. His commitment to violence prevention earned him national recognition from the Democratic congressional leadership in 1999. Tajae has a degree in forensic psychology from John Jay College of Criminal Justice and has taken postgraduate courses in negotiation and conflict resolution from Columbia University School of Continuing Education. In 2004, Tajae was honored with the James Bosky Award for Outstanding Youth Leadership from the Association of Conflict Resolution. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Claire and Zaid to talk about their work with restorative justice work with people engaged in the criminal justice system. Thank you so much, Claire and Zaid.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. So I think it's evident to everyone that our justice system is negatively impacting our communities of color in disproportionate numbers. And specifically, our youth that exist in the margins are more impacted by incarceration, whether it's a parent who's incarcerated, another family member, or even themselves. And there's been some movement and advocacy to mitigate that through raise the age and bail reform. But specifically with FSW, our restorative justice team works daily to disrupt that school to prison pipeline that we mentioned, which feeds a well-established prison industrial complex. I mean, it's amazing how well established and how we can go back for years and years back through slavery and see the threads and see the ties. And so our team is, we work collaboratively to disrupt this pipeline. We have programs that work with our youth. Zaid is going to speak about our Credible Messenger program. And that's at the beginning of the spectrum for us. Zaid, I don't know if you want to step in and speak about Credible Messenger, and then I'll speak about the others. The Credible Messenger program is it targets our youngest population.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us. The Credible Messenger program is called the Community Credible Messenger Initiative. We basically work hand in hand with the Office of Children and Family Services. We deal with youth who are slated to be released. So we go into the facility and meet with the youth, build a rapport, assign him mentors who we call credible messengers because they have that lived experience, that credibility. One of the beautiful opportunities that we have is that we're able to work with people that we label system. There's a lot of people that work for OCFS who haven't gotten it yet. They're still stuck on this punitive lens. So this gives us an opportunity to not only offer services to the youth, but to also change the thinking of the people who work for OCFS, so that the ripple effect is longer reaching as a result of that. And we've been fortunate because there's been several individuals that work there who have actually changed. They changed their whole approach. It's no longer an immediate punitive response. Now it's, okay, let's take a more trauma-informed approach. And this is something that was foreign to them. And now I'm proud to say, as a result of the work that we've done, and not only myself, but my colleagues as well, we've been able to begin changing the culture of OCFS, at least in the Mid-Hudson region that we're affiliated with. One thing that I wanted to remind everybody and to share, if I could have anybody leave with anything, it's never underestimate the food insecurity of the people that we service. I had a situation where a youth came to me and basically confided with me that they were hungry. And as we were eating, he shared with me that a few of his friends were on a mission to go, they were going to Midtown to rob people for their AirPods so that they could get some food and, he said food and marijuana and stuff like that. But, his focus was on food. So he made a conscious choice to come and get food in a different way. And we were able, as a result of the conversation, we were able to connect him with a food bank so that he could bring home food. We were able to give him a internship at a food bank so that weekly he was able to bring groceries home, and it was able to deter him from having to pursue those funds in a different way. And it's just an example of how we're able to interrupt that pipeline, because, he could have taken the next step, and, then he may have been in one of the programs that Claire is going to talk about, because she goes into the county jail and deals with youth who are a little bit older than mine. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Claire, so you can expound on your programs as well.
So that was a great example of food, right? He received that physical food, and then he also received food in terms of alternatives. What are some other options that you can think about and entertain to get your needs met? And so he ended up with an internship. He ended up with a long-term solution to the food insecurity that the family was facing. And so we started with the CCMI program because that's an opportunity for us to intervene and intercept our youth before they enter adult facilities. And the next program that I'll speak about is the Navigating Fatherhood program, which just ended in August. We're awaiting word from the federal government to see if we have been refunded. But in the meantime, I continue to facilitate workshops in the jail with these young men. These are adolescent fathers who are incarcerated. The grant requires that we work with young men who are 16 to 24 years old. So if you can imagine a 16-year-old who is still a teenager, still figuring out the world, still making, trying to figure out where do they fit. And in addition to that, they are parents and having to be responsible for a young life. Our program in the county jail meets weekly with these young men, and our whole goal is to really offer workshop and space for them to explore their own childhood, traumatic childhood experiences, and how those experiences have impacted and are impacting them as men and as parents. And then offer them opportunity to think of other ways, like how can I go about meeting my needs? How can I go about understanding who I am and where do I fit in the world without, compounding the trauma that I've already experienced. And we know that when a parent, whether it's a father or mother, is incarcerated, that also impacts the family. So that individual is not the only one who's locked up. It's the family, it impacts the entire family. So the idea is if we can intervene and offer them opportunities to see other options, once they're released, they can make different choices. And that program also follows these young men in community. We offer them mentoring opportunities, we offer them work, job readiness. If we can plug them into employment or vocational training, we do that as well. The next program is Emerge and Growing Together. And these are programs that are directed by Janet Donat. And they're pre-release and reentry programs for mothers and women. And that program is run out of the county jail as well. It's very similar to the Navigating Fatherhood program, except it targets women. Janet has been able to successfully advocate for and receive approval to run a gardening program in the jail. And that has had amazing impact on the women because they've had the ability to, number one, be outdoors, connect with nature, find, reconnect with their own humanity, and really explore their own traumatic experiences in different ways, in a non-traditional way. So in addition to doing workshops, facilitating workshops and circle, they are able to be tactile, and oftentimes what they produce, they're able to give back to community. So this past summer, they've had an abundance of tomatoes and more that they can use. So they've been able to take those tomatoes and contribute to a local food pantry, right? And that can only feed the soul. So the next program I'll speak about is the County Reentry Task Force, which we recently got in April. And as you can see, we're moving along the age spectrum now. So these are men and women who are coming home from state facilities, having served longer sentences. Oftentimes they themselves have gone in as teenagers and are coming out as adults. So they're coming out 40, 50. We recently had a gentleman who served 46 years and came out as a 60-something-year-old man. And so what this task force team offers these men and women is a soft landing. Oftentimes, society has changed. I mean, from 5 years ago, technology, simple things that we take for granted has changed. And so the task force really tries to help them navigate the mandates of parole and their own personal goals. Many of our men or women, having served 5, 10, 15 years, they come out with education, they come out with training, they come out with their own personal goals as to the next steps they want to take. And that sometimes conflicts with the mandates of parole. Parole mandates are usually based on the crime that was committed and the charge and conviction. And if you serve 10, 15 years, oftentimes you're no longer that person. You're miles away from who that person was, and you want to move forward. And so the parole mandates can sometimes feel like a hindrance. And so our team does a lot of dialogue and conversation around, how do you meet those mandates and still feel like you are making progress in what your personal goals are. The next program that we'll talk about is the Real Parenting Program, which is a community-based program. And this program is for men and women who are pursuing more intimate involvement in their children's lives. Many times they are mandated by CPS or court. It could be for to prevent separation from family. It could be that court is requiring them to go through parenting program as a step in the process of reunifying with their children. So Kevin Bunch, who facilitates that program, really works with the parents to provide a space where there is some psychoeducational going on, but a big part of it is that peer support. Because he finds that when they are learning from each other is when the richest experience happens, because they have the answers. And if we're able to provide them the space where they can have that dialogue and that exchange, then they can provide the support to each other. They can learn from each other. They can connect with each other as a community in workshop and outside, and provide that support beyond when the program is over. Yeah, I think that's basically all of the programs that we offer at FSW. And the whole idea really is about creating spaces for our people who are living on the margins to be heard, for them to embrace their power and self-advocate in forms that usually make decisions for them instead of with them. So we really try to work collaboratively across our programs to offer all of our people, all of our clients, opportunity. Someone who is on this line right now, I always use his phrase, to awaken the genius within each person. And that's what we try to do.
Thank you so much, Claire and Zaid. And I'm really impressed by the wonderful work that you're doing, addressing great needs. And I'm really looking forward to the day when every person who interacts with our criminal industrial complex or prison industrial complex has the opportunity to have access to these wonderful programs. I'd like to invite Nathalie next to talk about your experience working with people in our jail and youth detention facility. Thank you, Nathalie.
Hi, yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jill and Nada, and thank you, Claire, for everything you shared. Yeah, so as Jill mentioned before, I'm a credible messenger myself. I am also a performing artist. I'm a peer navigator with Braveheart's Bravery Beyond Bars program. And so just one second. Okay. And so a lot of the work that we were doing with Brave Hearts and with Ceremony Cerebellum, you know, is based on restorative principles. And I'm not sure if Jill mentioned it, but I wanted to preface it by saying, if anyone hasn't had a chance to watch the first part of the Advancing Restorative Justice in Westchester, I know it's on YouTube, available if you search through Westpac. But you know, like Jill was saying, the restorative principles based in Indigenous practice. So I had the honor of training with the Mediation Center of Dutchess County this past winter, doing a Spanish-speaking circle keeping program. And so that was like the formal training of the circle keeping process in part to other restorative principles practices. But what I learned there on a formal scale and what I was already doing at Westchester County Department of Corrections and Woodfield, the juvenile detention center was, it goes across the board. If you're on the receiving end of it, like Claire was saying, a lot, you know, the main goal is just to create and have the space for people in the circle to be able, okay, for people that are in the space to be able to, first and foremost, know that they're in a safe space. And so one time somebody asked me, what is your goal when you do your work with Ceremony Cerebellum, which is based around those three principles: ceremony, somatics, and circle. And I told them that my main safety was priority. So just to kind of reiterate a couple of the things that were already said. What that safety, when you hear somebody say a safe space, it means, okay, baby. It means regulating your nervous system. So coming from a place where your nervous system is in fight or flight or survival mode all the time. I think in restorative principles, along with circle, that it's an important part. I just need a second. Because you know their radars go off as soon as you start talking. You doing okay? Okay.
It's wonderful to have him with us as well.
Thank you. Here you go. Yeah, so the safety aspect, when you hear about restorative principles, that is the overall goal of regulating the nervous system before you can even begin to have conversations or dialogue. So just having that mindfulness always of coming into that space, knowing that a lot of and most people, you know, are having those trauma responses still, you know, whether they're, you know, 13 or whether they're 26 or 50 or 60, like Claire was saying. So one of the questions that I was asked was, what is the healing aspect of circles for people inside? And as I was saying before, the healing aspects are the same whether you're inside or not, based on the facilitator's knowledge and understanding of how to practice and deliver restorative principles practices, because you know, as I mentioned, it being an indigenous based practice already has a space to be appropriated and misused. And so it's important that the practice in itself of restorative principles is fully understood, taught, and practiced so that it can be effective in the way that it needs to be effective. Whether you're inside or outside, you will most likely get the benefits of, you know, being in a space that is designed to ease tension. And as Ibram X. Kendi says, point at policies, not people. And so restorative principles helps to kind of just take a step back and you know, not look at maybe that correction officer, or maybe not look at that school principal as, you know, someone that otherwise you would think is a gatekeeper, or, you know, somebody that has a legit position of power that can be used in a retaliation. So the second thing that she asked me to share was the pros and cons of restorative work. So as I mentioned before, the pros and cons is that the restorative work, you know, as activism, as social justice, as these movements have become more mainstream in the past 3 years since, you know, since we had to lay our brother and sister, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, to rest in power. There's a lot of room for performative activism. So I mentioned it before, there has to be just that continuing education practice of, is my organization that's providing these restorative practices, are they you know, keeping up with and respecting the developing you know, practices that are coming as all of this develops? Because, you know, there are a lot of new people on the scene that have good intentions, but may not necessarily have the full scope, or have not necessarily had access to speak to organizers that have been in more spaces or have been doing more work in the immediate community. So I wrote a quote down from Amanda Seals. She's a Black scholar. She's wonderful. And her quote was, "Executives will accuse you of being condescending by simply just addressing them as an equal, because how dare you address them as an equal, because then that means you're being condescending because you're speaking to them on the level that they see you on, which is lower than them." So just to kind of tie it all together with what I was saying about, first and foremost, having the understanding to be able to deliver the restorative practices, having the mindfulness of where you're going to deliver that, so that you can just have, a better idea of how you can get in the door. And then once you get in the door, meet the needs of any needs that need to be met without having a savior complex. So a lot of the work that I was doing and have been doing, I'm at the end tail of it. They're already inside. They have already most likely dealt with years and years and years of systems, whether that's the child welfare system, whether that's, living in a residential foster care, being away and separated from your family, the criminal justice system, whether that's directly through the community or through the school to prison pipeline. So at the point where I'm meeting these individuals, there's a lot of dehumanization is already taking place. So in terms of being inside and easing that tension, I mean, there's a lot of bridges that are not necessarily visible, and a lot of power that is also not visible. And so the goal is always to focus on the individual. So I've also done work with like behavior therapy and children with autism and cerebral palsy and stuff like that. And it was always interesting to me when I worked with families, because I was taught to always support the individual. And so when I worked with families, the families would, rightfully so, want their own respite. They would want, me to wash dishes, or they would want me to do some type of activity with the individual. But my job was literally to be there, make sure the individual was safe, make sure that they were communicating with me and that I was communicating back to them, in that reciprocal way. And so that translates well into doing the work inside, in which, you may be told one thing by an institution, you may be told another thing by, somebody else at that institution. So, there's so many resources in the community and organizers, such as this network, such as the Hudson Valley Network, and, a few others that have those conversations on a more frequent basis, that are, that can just kind of provide more in terms of, what people experience and happen in the, what experiences they're having inside. Because that's kind of it's one of those things that, yes, there are wonderful, great things coming out of it and happening out of it. But, just like going to a new school, you don't necessarily know what to expect until your first day. Okay, it's nap time. So in terms of like,
Thanks. Thank you very much, Natalie. I really appreciate your highlighting the need to be mindful and making safety a priority, as well as connecting with the past in the community, with the individual, and highlighting the equity that comes with sitting in circle and the need to really respect each person and not, at the same time, not see ourselves as saviors. It does take a community. Tajae, I want to welcome you and ask you finally to talk about how we keep our young people out of this system.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jill, that's a big question. If I had the answer to it, I would probably not be here. I'd be somewhere on a bigger stage. I'm trying to figure it out. I think like we all are. But the first thing I would say is that it's important that we recognize that our young people are hurting. Our young people have been hurting for a long time, particularly in the Black and Brown communities. The level of support that is needed to help our young people get through those very critical years have not been there. Some of that, sort of stems from the breakdown in the household. But I also believe that a lot of the support that should be there for the young people, particularly in school, has not been, and it's unfortunate. We're in a position as a mediation center to provide, some of the social emotional learning that young people normally wouldn't get, and the level of intervention in terms of program that they don't get in other places. We're fortunate to have partnerships with a family court in Westchester County, and that partnership allows for us to work with young people and their families. My colleague, Vicky Kazam, is here. I'm not going to ask her to speak yet, but in a little bit, I'll ask her to talk a little bit more about that partnership. But, our goal is to be able to be there to support the young person, young people and the families when the system cannot provide what it is that they're looking for. Doesn't mean that we can help them all, but what we strive to do is to identify what the needs are and to figure out how we can connect them with the resources that can support them in the best way possible. Sometimes we think about it as a sort of bigger endeavor, and it's not always. I find that a lot of what we have to do first is the thing that most of us here know how to do well, which is to listen. Most young people find themselves in situations, and again, I'm not just saying, I'm far from a young person now at this point in my life, but just having conversations with them have led me to realize that most young people feel like adults don't listen to them. I was fortunate to be on a webinar with Judge Humphrey and several other folks a couple of months back, and they had young people who have grown through the foster care system talk about their experience. And the biggest thing they said is, when they were engaged with court, they didn't feel like an individual. They felt like a number. They didn't feel like anyone wanted to listen to them. And the experience in and of itself felt very traumatic for them. And I get it. When cases are referred to us in the mediation center, our first goal is to listen and connect, right? Because I can't expect a young person, I can't expect a family to open up to us, to allow for us to help navigate them through a process where hopefully they can come out and strategize and figure out how to coexist in a much better way. But I can't expect any of that to happen if I don't make the correct connection first. And so the connection is the most important thing. And that starts by listening, not listening to make judgment, but listening to understand. And I think, for most of us here who do dispute resolution work, I see several names I'm familiar with, we sort of know that if we listen to understand, we put ourselves in a much better position to be able to create agreements, collaborative agreements. So that's the first thing I wanted to sort of put out there. The work we're doing in Westchester County now has been a long time coming for several reasons. You know, Vicky predates me in terms of the RJ work with the center. We pushed for many, many years to bring restorative processes to the communities that we serve here in Westchester County. If I go back to the mid 2000s, you know, I felt like there were a lot more sort of doors closed in our face, and a lot of that sounds great, but yeah, it's not the right time. We've reached a point now where I think people are saying nothing else is working, and we recognize the importance of what you've been talking about. So we're fortunate that there is a lot of movement now, but there was struggle for some time. There was struggle because I think people did not see the value in what it was we were trying to put forth. Creating a larger community